I have a message for the loyal BioTalk and new BioTalk listeners that we have a special edition today that's going to be longer than our traditional half-hour podcast. But we have one of the pioneers of the biohealth capital region, Doug Doerfler, who has many words of wisdom. And if you have a 30-minute drive to work, sit in your car in a parking lot for 15 extra minutes so you can listen to this whole podcast.
You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the biohealth capital region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. As you know, I'm with Biohealth Innovation in the biohealth capital region. And on this podcast, we interview leaders from the biohealth industry, some who have had a long history, some short histories. And we have one of the pioneers from the biohealth capital region with us today, Doug Doerfler, the founder and CEO of MaxCyte. Doug, welcome to BioTalk.
Well, Rich, thank you. And I first want to thank you for your leadership. Since you've come to this area, things have really picked up. And I feel that there's a new environment here for young entrepreneurs and startups and providing them the ability to really start businesses, which I think is one of the most exciting things that someone can ever do. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a very nice compliment from one of the pioneers here and the founders of this region. So, Doug, what we want to do today is learn about your success and secrets so that some of those young entrepreneurs that are listening to this will learn from your experiences and some of the do's and don'ts, and how you can build a successful bio company like you have with MaxCyte.
Well, I'll try, but you know, this is a lot of fits and starts. And
there's no recipe.
No, there's no recipe at all. It's hard to say when you're doing good or doing bad, but you try to do it. Try to make progress every day you do.
The most important thing is surviving, and you've survived.
Absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, we have. Thank you.
So as part of the introduction, why don't we talk about you, your history, your background, and you can go back as far as you want and bring us up to date to where we are today. We'll do a deep dive into some of the companies you've worked for, some of the industry relationships, and MaxCyte for sure, but a little background on your history.
Sure. So I grew up in Baltimore, so pretty close to this area geographically, but really a world apart.
The longest 35 miles in the world, I've been told, since when I first got here.
And it sure is. And so I came down here in 1981 to work for a company called Bethesda Research Labs. And Bethesda Research Labs, called BRL, was one of the real pioneers in the molecular biology space. So we made enzymes and products and kits for this whole new field of recombinant biology. And I was hired because I had a background in the tools industry, believe it or not. I was working for an automotive tool company, and the CEO at the time, a gentleman named Steve Turner, thought I had some things that could help him with his business because of my background in tools. I also had a very strong interest in biology and chemistry as well, and so it was a good match. It was one of those situations where when I joined the company, we were at $12 million in revenue, and we were losing $12 million a year. I was asking my friends and family if this was a good move, and they all said unilaterally, no. I mean, that's not a business. We don't even know what that is. But it was the new area of molecular biology, and it seemed just fascinating. And so I was fortunate enough to work there for 13, 14 years. We merged with a company called Gibco, which was the leading cell culture company in the world, still is. And we formed through that Life Technologies. And Jim Barrett became the CEO. And Jim, as you know, went on with NEA and just had an amazing career. And so I worked with Jim for a number of years. And then we then were acquired, if you will, by the Dextra Corporation, who actually put us all together. Dextra owned Gibco. And then Stark Thompson came in, who was CEO of Life Technologies. I left there in kind of the mid-'90s. And during that period, I ran a lot of businesses for them and global businesses. And it was a fascinating time. And I think it was a time when scientists are by nature educators, and there was a lot of whiteboards there. And so pretty much every hour, someone was up there with a dry erase marker explaining what DNA was and explaining what cloning was. And so it was really, really interesting to really learn about a new technology at the earliest times. I left there and I left the area and went to a company called Immunicon, which was up in Pennsylvania, that eventually got acquired by J&J. And then I left Pennsylvania. We moved the family to Arkansas, where I spent several years working for the only biotech company in Arkansas, if you can believe it. There is one, and I worked for it. And it was an interesting company called Pelfreeze that had an HLA typing business, and it had a molecular biology business and a cloning business. And I left there in the kind of the late 90s and was looking for something to do and was traveling kind of all around the world, frankly, looking for something to do. And my wife she said, well, the average life expectancy of a biotech CEO is X, and X is a lifetime. I don't want to move around a lot. Why don't we move back to where we know and see if we can make a go of this area? So I moved back to Gaithersburg.
Why Gaithersburg rather than Baltimore?
Because of the biotech sector here.
Okay, the cluster that was here evolving.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it was here. It wasn't as big as it is today, but you did have MedImmune, Human Genome Sciences, and there was a lot of small companies around this area. And so I worked with John Holliday, who was with Entremed, and he was the co-founder with me, and we formed what was called TheraMed at the time, which eventually became MaxCyte, and that was in 1999. So we're about our 20th anniversary in the area. We've always been in Gaithersburg, and it's been a very interesting ride.
One of the things they talk about, the knocks on this region, is we really don't have enough experienced and serial entrepreneurs, and we don't really sort of like to have the hybrid effect where you have hundreds of companies coming out of San Diego out of one company. But if you look at some of your roots in life technologies, there's a hell of a lot of success stories and individuals who came out of life still in the region, other companies that have formed from that. Talk a little bit about that.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, when Life Technologies was acquired by that point in Vitrogen, and then it again became Life Technologies, and now it's Thermo Fisher up in Frederick. But a lot of companies that were spawned out of Life Technologies, and they were in many cases pure play technologies that needed to find their commercial legs. And so there's a number of those companies, as with MedImmune, I mean, Macrogenics, and there's just a lot of companies around here that have developed over time coming from these larger companies. So, and frankly, we all still get together, not figuratively, but we speak to one another and try to keep close. But I think as much as we can, we should be finding ways, and I know you do this. This is one of the things I really respect from my perspective of what you do, is to convene this group, because there's a lot of experience here. There's a lot of great ideas. I don't think that there's an area in this world that has more new, novel ideas based on excellent science than what's going on in the zip codes around 20878.
I think basically it's the richest biohealth asset region in the world, and people don't understand that. The key is we're still working on getting more commercialization out of those great assets, but it's starting to evolve. And I think if you look over the last 3 years, just look at the deals that have been done, whether they be financings, IPOs, or M&As out of this region, and more importantly, the things that have stuck here rather than left. I think we're starting to get to a new generation going on here in this region.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've always viewed maybe Marylanders or people who have come here to be not the kind of people that are going to be standing on top of their car with megaphones telling them how great you are and how great their company. I think it's a pretty humble group of entrepreneurs, and I think that has benefits, because my sense is that we're typically plotters and we work hard to build our businesses from the ground up.
Plus, we don't have $100 million to start a new business.
We don't. Yeah, that's true.
That's why we plot a lot.
Yeah, I'm not. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. There's obviously a whole new group of these $200 million Series A, and I just can't imagine what I would do with that much money starting a company. I would just imagine that the mistakes that you would make would be logarithmically higher than what you make if you're starting with $2 or $3 million. It has to be, right?
Let's go back to, and you mentioned John Holliday. You've been working for a lot of different companies. All of a sudden, the life of a biotech, as you talked about with your wife, CEO, is not really long. What was it that when you found out that you wanted to go the entrepreneurial pathway versus working for other people?
I've thought about that a little bit, and I think the simplest question was I was probably unemployable at that point.
You're being honest now.
You work in a number of companies, and you start, I think Life Technologies was one where there was so many new things going on in the science. I mean, every day, like there is today in cell therapy, and that day everything was just exploding and everything was new. And if you wanted to, you could grab any idea, any initiative, and run with it, and it could be a whole new industry. And so I think that environment really allowed all of us to be creative and to be leaders and to be kind of fearless, because we had this really good structure that was around us. It was a business that was growing at 30% a year, high margins, global, and we were at the cutting edge working with great scientists. And so you had an environment where it was okay to fail. And people talk about that a lot, but I felt really in my career to be in an environment that actually that was the case. You could fail and get back up, and there was a group of people, like-minded, same kind of age, really willing to help you move forward, which was kind of cool. And then when I went out to Arkansas, I actually ended up running that business and liked the business part of running a business by myself. And I tried to buy that business, and the owner, who had been in his family for a number of years, decided not to sell it. We parted ways as great friends and still keep in contact. But when I came out here, I realized that it was something that I really felt I could do. And frankly, John is a serial entrepreneur himself, and he allowed me to, again, do what I felt was needed. And you make mistakes, you get back on your feet, you move on, and you figure out you just stay on that trail. That's what you need to do all the time to keep it going.
So it's been almost 20 years now, I guess, right?
Yeah, it has.
With MaxCyte. So let's talk to the BioTalk listeners about the beginning of MaxCyte, where your focus was, where it's progressed to today, a little bit about the history.
It's kind of come full circle. So when we created MaxCyte, we licensed some technology that was from the Center for Blood Research at Harvard. And it was to modify, in this case, red blood cells to return back to the patient to provide a supercharged red blood cell to treat hypoxia. And it was a really difficult challenge because what you had to do was you had to take cells from a patient, you had to engineer those cells and return them back to the patient within 3 hours. You had to do it sterile, you had to do it high efficiency, and you also had to do it in a large volume so you could make a therapeutic dose from it. And it was going to be in a hospital setting because you don't want to be moving blood from one location to another. So we developed a system. We actually started clinical trials. And then we realized that it was a really tough nut to crack because these red blood cells were supercharged, which meant that when they circulated through the body, they offloaded more oxygen than a normal red blood cell would do. But what happened was that the more oxygen that was being released by the red blood cells, the body compensated by producing less erythropoietin, which meant less red blood cells. And so you couldn't kind of get ahead of the curve because the body was always compensating against you. That being said, we used that technology and then quickly pivoted to something that people didn't think could be done, which was the engineering of white blood cells. And there was actually a paper that had been written at NIH that said that you could not use our core technology, which is flow electroporation, using electric forces to put molecules into cells, in white cells to engineer them properly. And so that was like a big red flag to us. We said, that's something we've really got to go after. And so we began working in that area, engineering white blood cells, built this just incredible team of scientists and engineers, small team, but...
Were most of them local, or did you have to recruit many?
It was all locals, people from NIH, someone from the David Taylor Naval Research Center. We had my co-founder at the time, Dr. Joseph Frattantoni, had just come from the Center for Blood Research at FDA. So we had this remarkable group of talented biophysicists and hematologists, and we basically rebuilt the technology to do this. And we then began to talk to venture investors to try to finance the company. And then another kind of one of those chance encounters happened. I was in my desk and I got a call from Martine Rothblatt, and she called me on the phone. And as you know, Martine is the CEO and founder of United Therapeutics. And she called and she introduced herself and she said, I understand you have this technology that can modify cells, and we have a cell therapy program for treating pulmonary arterial hypertension, and would you be interested in talking to me about it? I said, well, of course. And so I went down and met with her, and she knew as much about my technology as I did, and also had a very clear idea of what it is that she wanted to achieve. And so over the course of a very short period of time, we actually did our first deal with United Therapeutics. And it was to develop a cell-based therapy for the treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension, which is her main focus as a company. So got to know her and worked with her team quite well. And then that really did have a major impact on our ability to raise our first round. So when we were formed out of Entremed, we were spun out immediately. Entremed was a majority shareholder. I was a minority shareholder. And then kind of stepping back a little bit in time, then around 2001, we had the whole issue with the Human Genome Project, and Bill Clinton and Tony Blair talked about there would be no patents. And so there was no money coming into biotech. everything got shut off, and we had to go out and find venture investors and angels. So we did an angel round, and we did a series of angel rounds, and it was a kind of a unique structure. It was a convertible note that was priced at the next institutional round with a 15% discount. So we never priced any of our initial rounds. Everything came in at unpriced, basically. So we did that. We did the deal with United Therapeutics. We had surveyed, we probably had been to 70 different VCs over the course of 2 or 3 years.
And the 1 or 2 in your backyard.
And the 1 or 2 in our backyard. But we spent a lot of time in the Southeast, and actually InterSouth Partners did the lead. And we met with them 8 times. And on the 8th time, their lead partner, Dennis Doherty, said, well, I've asked you all the questions. You've always given me great answers. You have one question to ask me. And I said, I'm not sure what that is. He said, are you going to invest or not? I said, are you going to invest or not? He said, we are. In hindsight, it was, their team told me that it was because of the United deal that they actually made the investment, because they didn't know enough to do the due diligence on a technology like this because it was so new. But they felt that a corporate partner who had a real medical need for a technology like this, that had the means to look at all the different available technologies, selected ours.
That was their good housekeeping seal of approval.
Absolutely. And because of that relationship, again, with a local company in Silver Spring, Maryland, allowed us to start raising our venture round.
And then when you say 8 meetings, over the course of how many months did those 8 meetings occur?
That was probably close to a year and a half.
Oh, so 18 months, 8 meetings to get your lead investor.
Yes, and every time you could tell them taking copious notes, because every time we had made a statement about what we were going to do, we were also taking the notes. We were doing it. So we wanted to make sure that we were always being reasonable in terms of our goals and objectives, and that we always met those and then continued to progress. And so there was, I think, a general sense that we did what we said we're going to do, which was really all they could ask for. I remember the money always doesn't come in one amount, it comes in tranches. And every time there would be a new tranche to come in, Dennis would come up and he would sit across the table from me and he said, tell me what you're going to do and look me in the eye, and are you committed to making that happen? And of course I did, and we did. That financing was very personal at that level. You're giving someone an assurance that you're going to do something for them, and that's at least the way they operated. At the same time, the other major seal of approval was the Maryland Venture Fund. So when we did our Series A, we were trying to pull together a syndicate, and InterSouth was getting close to investing. But when the Maryland Venture Fund, which was slightly different configuration than is today, but they made their commitment that they would invest on a percentage basis if we found a lead. And so it was one of these symbiotic relationships where we went back to InterSouth and said, we now have someone that's going to come in behind you. And so they felt comfortable leading because they had a group like the Maryland Venture Fund that had the wherewithal and the resources to support them. And then that allowed us to create our syndicate, which continued to invest in the company.
So the lesson for our entrepreneurs listening through this process you went through, I'll call it the PPPP, patience, persistence, performance, and partners. You basically needed every element of that to get through this period, which was a very, I'm sure, challenging time for the company. And you're also saying, where's the next payroll coming from? And you're waiting to close with these venture capitalists.
So one of the P's, people.
Well, that's the 5th P.
That's the 5th P, because we had a great team, just a great team of scientists and business people. And we would all go together. And it was really interesting because I've reflected on this so many times. And I've talked to the VCs about this too. And it was really telling. They said that they always heard the questions and answers, but what really intrigued them was when there was some disagreement amongst the team, how that team was able to work through that, and what was the reaction of the team members, and was this a group that they could feel comfortable that the team would deliberate and come up with an answer, not be dominated by one person or be too academic or too theoretical. And so that was something that I didn't really realize until after the fact, that was such an important part of the decision that they made, which was the participation, another P, of the team in order to come to a conclusion that made sense. And it wasn't that and they were very cautious when we all nodded our head in agreement, because that meant we probably had rehearsed that answer. But when we had answers that we hadn't rehearsed that were maybe not aligned, but very quickly we could figure out common ground, that was important to them.
It's a great lesson learned. So based on the evolution to where you are today, Let's talk a little bit about your products and services, who your customers are, what your markets are today.
This is such an exciting business, MaxCyte. We have about 55 people. It's just more than half have advanced degrees in medicine or engineering and science. We are focused really on one thing, and that's taking our technology, our same flow electroporation technology, which we're the only company in the world that does this. We have extraordinary expertise in this, and we focus it on solving problems to make better medicines. And so we have really two different areas we work in, actually three. One is that we sell our technology to big pharma companies and biotech companies.
Sell or license?
Sell. In this case, we sell the instrumentation to companies who are doing drug discovery, small molecule discovery, and biologics development. And we have 10 of the top 10 pharmas, 20 of the top 25 pharmas are our customers. And they use it for, again, small molecule discovery and all the way through to vaccine production and viral vector production. The other part of our business where we license our technology is for cellular therapies. And this is where it's a non-viral cell engineering technology. And we have over 80 partnered programs now. And of those 80, over 40 are partnered for clinical purposes. And now we have 4 of those that are licensed for commercial purposes. And this spans from regenerative medicine to immuno-oncology and to inherited genetic diseases. And so we work with companies like Editas and Sangamo, CRISPR, Kite. These are companies that are our partners that use our technology to develop a treatment for sickle cell disease or beta thalassemia. They use it for regenerative medicine applications, infectious diseases. We do a lot of work in the area of non-viral editing of cells, T cells, for allogeneic CAR T, which is really the next generation after Chimera and Yescarta. So what's really fun about this business and exciting about it is that our team can really think about where this field is moving toward and try to get one step ahead, solve that problem before the partner solves it, before the company, our partner needs to solve the problem. So we come in with our system with engineering cells, but we also know what the biological output is of that cell. So we can help work with that company to ensure that they're identifying the right attributes of the product, not just that our technology contribute to it, but all parts of the biological system, because these are very complicated technologies. And as this field is moving forward, clinicians get a deeper understanding of the complexity of diseases. And what they're also doing is they're designing more complex cellular therapies. They want to engineer multiple pathways in the cell at one time. So it's getting more complex, more complicated. But on the other side of the equation is patient access. You need to make sure that these products can be made quick, they can be made simply, if you will, and they can be made at a price that's affordable. And those two, patient access and complexity, are kind of the Gordian knot. They're two forces that are opposed to one another, but we're positioning ourselves right in the center of that. We think that our technology uniquely can make complex cells more easily made and less expensive to administer to patients faster. And that's what we're focused in on as a company. And we think that that's a defendable niche that we have, and it's a unique niche, and that's what we do, and that's what we talk about. And that's a purpose that really does resonate with all of us in the company. That's why we're here every day.
I've read something about something you're branding as the expert platform. And is what you've just described the elements of the expert platform?
Yeah, so it's a new program. We just launched a new series of instruments. You can see them on our website, really great-looking systems. But over the last, let's say, 10 years, there's been a major push to move these cell therapies from academia into industry. And if you look at virtually all of the cell therapies that are currently in clinical trials or have been approved, they all come out of academia, every one of them. Yescarta, the Kite product, comes out of Steve Rosenberg's lab. The Novartis product comes out of Carl June's lab. Juno products come out of, again, Memorial Sloan Kettering or other universities. And so when we were, up until Expert came out, we were moving things from the academic setting to the clinical setting. What Expert allows one to do is move it from academia to the clinic to commercialization. So what Expert has in it are built-in software and all the things that one would need to actually commercialize the technology, where we can manufacture now the systems, which we do here in Gaithersburg. We manufacture the instruments here. We design, develop them here. We can build them for commercial use so that when we partner with a company, they know we can work with them at the lab bench, move them into the clinic, and eventually move them to a full-scale commercial launch of their product, which again is something that we've been investing in, and we're one of the only people that can actually do this.
So it's really a vertically integrated system.
Completely. It's from bench to, as they said, bench to bedside.
Bedside, right.
That's what we've done, yeah.
Now, I think there's something else that I've been reading about, and you're actually going to go through the process of supplying all of the pharma and bio companies to actually looking at your own drug development. And you have another program that you're embarking upon. Let's talk to the listeners about that.
It's called Karma. And what Karma is, it's taking our technology and, again, solving a problem that hadn't been solved before. And one of the issues we see with cell therapy is that it's costly, it's time-consuming, and they typically use viruses, and there's some potential safety issues. What Karma is this is where I talked about coming full circle. Karma is a platform that allows you to take fresh cells from a patient. So we take fresh cells, we engineer the patient, and we finish the engineering in a day. And if you compare that to, Yescarta, Chimera, the other ones, those products take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks plus, the manufacturers. Ours takes less than a day. And the benefits of that are really two, just from that perspective. One is that it doesn't require you to have the high overhead cost, the high bricks and mortar cost. There is a lot of cost to maintain those cells for an extended period of time. What we're also hearing from clinicians, which is probably the most important part, is that if you're treating an oncology patient, they don't want to wait a month to get their drug. They're typically at a late stage. They have to manage themselves and their families, and that could literally be a lifetime. And so if we can cut that back down to a couple weeks, a week, that has a dramatic impact on patient care and managing that patient. And so we're focused on Karma. So it's a rapid way of producing and manufacturing a cell therapy. And we also we don't use viruses, we use what's called messenger RNA. And messenger RNA is a molecule that goes into the cell and expresses a protein. It doesn't go into the nucleus. It's a short-acting drug, and we believe we're going to be able to apply this to solid tumors, which again is unique in the cell therapy world. So we built a great team here. We have about 10 people that are focused on this program. And our first product is called MCY-M11. It's a mesothelin-directed CAR product that's in mesothelioma and ovarian cancer. We're at the National Cancer Institute in Washington University of St. Louis. We're into our second dose cohort. We'll be announcing dosing our first patient in another administration of the same drug for non-small cell lung cancer, for colorectal cancer, and bile duct cancer. So it's a whole new area for us, but we can really leverage our close to 20 years in developing this technology, helping other companies, but now we're on our own with this drug, and it's unique, it's novel, and just, again, exciting, and it's a whole new chapter in MaxCyte's book. We're pretty excited about that.
Congrats and good luck on that, really. I'm speaking with Doug Doerfler, founder and president and CEO of MaxCyte, one of the pioneers in this region. And one of the things you've been able to balance, Doug, which I admire, is that in addition to helping grow and build a biotech company, you also have been very active and visible in the community, recognizing that if you don't try to give back, it's never going to grow around you. So let's talk to the listeners a little bit about your involvement, for example, in the Maryland Tech Council and the International Bio Organization, which I know you're on the executive committee of.
I got involved with Bio before it was Bio, where it was called the Association of Biotechnology Companies. It was a small company.
What year was that?
Oh, boy, that was in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And then we formed Bio. I forgot what year that was. And I've been actively involved in the organization all the way through. And one of the things I do there is I co-chair the Capital Formation Committee for Bio. And so that work I do and it's the longest standing committee at Bio. And what we're really trying to do is keep a level playing field for small companies so that they have access to capital, that we make sure that there's a more predictable regulatory system, that there's a strong intellectual property system. And these are all policy initiatives that Bio undertakes. The Jobs Act that was passed, I can say, was a good part of that came from Bio and our lobbying. A few years ago, there was $1 billion that was distributed to biotech companies that came out of the Bio Initiative. We're working to do things like improve the treatment of NOLs. There's a lot of programs that we have thought about to not only help companies, but help investors invest in biotech companies. And so it's a great learning experience. I've been able to meet just some amazing people that are all dedicated to improving patient health, from the smallest company like mine up to the Genentech Roches of the world who sit on these committees. And it's been really a fantastic experience. I would recommend, if anyone's thinking about getting involved in the industry, is to take a role. It doesn't matter what the organization is, but take a role, be a foot soldier, learn about an issue, go to Capitol Hill, go to Annapolis, meet with the legislators, because they really don't know that much about what we do. And the more they know about what we do, I think the better they're going to be equipped to understand how laws are relevant, either on a positive perspective or a negative perspective, to what we're all trying to do, which is improve patient health. And so I got involved in the Maryland Tech Council for pretty much the same reason. And again, it's networking. It's also because of the work that I had done with the Maryland Venture Fund, and realized how important that was to my business, how important the investor tax credit was, which we used every year. Those are just really important pieces of legislation. And if we don't get involved, if we don't stay involved, those things will go away, because there'll be something else that will be a bigger priority for someone who has no understanding of what biotech is. And so we've got to put our educator hat on. We've got to be our advocate, because I think it's one of the more important things to do. And frankly, when you talk to the board, my board, about this, I think they understand that, sure, they want you to focus 100% on what you're doing in the company, but they also understand that you just become, I think, a better, more rounded person about what's going on in the industry when you get to interact with your colleagues and peers and friends, and build these relationships and really understand and push.
Well, I think the board also understands that the time you invest in some of these policy issues, which have either national or statewide implications, MaxCyte can personally benefit through some of those policies and programs that come out of that lobbying that you're doing, which you have. And so, as you mentioned, the biotechnology tax credit program, that's something that every year the Assembly has to be educated on. And
it's always threatened.
Yeah, and it's threatened every year, and you try to grow it by $1 million or $2 million a year. But if you look at the return on investment that has come out of that, it's significant for the state of Maryland. So what I like is the chairing of the Capital Formation Committee for Bio. Now, we don't have a Capital Formation Committee for BioHealth Innovation or the BioHealth Capital Region Forum, but I don't know if you know, we had the first BioHealth Capital Region Investor Conference last year at AstraZeneca. We had 100 invited companies. We had 35 invited investors. J.P. Morgan and Wilson Sonsini were our sponsors, and we set up 400 one-on-one meetings between investors and companies. We're going to do it again October the 15th and 16th at AZ. I'm giving a little plug for this, but it's by invitation only. And it's invitation to the companies, which we've determined are commercially relevant, that the investors would want to see, and inviting investors, a lot of them who have never been to this region, to look at the quality of companies we have. But when you mention that title, we are not going to solve this on this podcast today. I want to follow up with you about doing something about capital formation for the BioHealth Capital Region and what you're doing nationally and internationally, and try to bring it back to our backyard.
Great. Well, one thing that we're doing right now is that one of the major ways of getting an individual state to move forward with one of these initiatives is to provide some relevance to another state that might be doing something similar, because there's always this inherent competition between states. And so what Bio's doing is putting together, and they're starting to publish this, a state-by-state directory of all the programs that are being done in each of those states, and provide that openly to all the state affiliates of Bio, so that there's a sense of what can be done, what's working, so that you're not inventing the wheel every time you're walking to the legislator. And so that's the kind of stuff that we like to do too.
And, copying somebody else's successful program is flattery, and we need to look at other things that are working in other parts of the country and bring them here. So you grew up, or you spent your time in Baltimore, you went away, you came back, you're in Gaithersburg 20 years now. I don't see any reason for you to leave, so don't leave. But more importantly, how do you tell our listeners about what it's been like for you to work in the industry and start and grow a business within this region? And why should other people think about this as a great place to start and run their business?
This is an amazing area because, first of all, the first part of the balance is to make sure you've got the grounding, and that comes from your family, that comes from your friends, and this is a great place to raise a family. And great schools, great communities, and there's just so many things that one can do and be outdoors, and culturally it's just a wonderful environment to spend time and to grow as a person. And I can't tell you, Rich, how many times, sometimes even today, where you have to go back and say, boy, this is a tough nut I'm going to try to crack. And it's always good to have someone say, well, stay on the trail. So that's first. And then secondly, it's the community. I mean, do you have other like-minded people that are all trying to do the same thing that can, again, it happened today. I talked to a fellow CEO, and I had a situation I was trying to work through in 5 minutes on the phone, and it was a new thought, but it helped to provide more clarity to what I wanted to do. So it's that network that is really important from an individual's perspective when you're trying to do something no one else has done, because it's always a bit of a lonely thing. And then just the network itself. I talked about the investors. I talked about therapeutics and Martine Rothblatt. I talked about that whole environment where you can help to enrich your company by virtue of finding new sources of capital, new partnerships. The biggest issue that most of us face are bringing in the right kind of people from the right backgrounds. And so that builds. And so this is although Maryland is a bit of a parochial state.
You think?
I do think in the biotech sector where you can focus on something that everyone feels that there's a great need to accomplish, I don't think anyone questions our purpose, that there is an environment here that is very, very nurturing. The work that you're doing is incredible. I really respect the work that AZ is doing, the Maryland Tech Council. All these organizations play a vital role, and I think they're only there and they're only useful if you tap into them, if you really try to become a part of it. And all these organizations they want you to become a part of it. It's not like you need to break into the club. The club's here. You just have to knock on a door, and they'll open a door and help you. But you also have to be willing to give a little bit back. And sometimes it doesn't take much. It could be a time. It could be answering a phone call or meeting someone who's just coming into the area looking for a new position, and you introduce them to someone, and who knows how that works. But
so it's been good for you.
It's been great.
So what I like about your answer is the traditional thing I hear from everybody. Oh, we've got the FDA. We have the NIH. We have CMS down the road. HHS is here. We have 800 companies within the BioHealth Capital Region. What you're talking about is a great place to raise a family. There's a great community. It's the peer-to-peer networking you could do by picking up a phone and talking to one of your peer CEOs about a problem that generally is very private and confidential, but it's easy to pick up, and also a thing that you'd like to talk to a CEO about rather than having to go to the board about, because you like to solve it internally rather than having to have the board solve it for you.
Well, that said, though, I mean, the community is made up of all those people.
Right.
So you're on the soccer field with your kid, and you realize that the kid that your kid's playing with, his parent is the head of cell and gene therapy at FDA.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute,
Yeah, right.
you're not gonna pitch your product to them, but you get to know them. And so when you go in there, it's not a foreign world. You know these people. These are people that are part of your community. So when you go into FDA or you go to NIH, they're just like everybody else. And they happen to live here, and they happen to enjoy the same things you do.
And you're saying things like Rip Ballou, who heads up GSK Vaccines, and they decided to locate here versus any place else in North America, said, my scientists and regulators get in a car, they drive 15 or 20 minutes, they go meet face-to-face with the person at the FDA or NIH that they're collaborating with. And how hard is that to do if you're in Boston or San Francisco? You can't do it. So anyway, thank you. I loved your answer to that. Now let's talk a little bit about the future of MaxCyte as well as Doug Doerfler. And we're talking to Doug, who's the founder, president, and CEO of MaxCyte. What are some of your personal goals, and what are some of the corporate goals for the future?
Personally, it's to stay healthy. It's to continue to be, don't overuse this word, but blessed with my family and 2 daughters and a wonderful wife and great friends, and just continue to enjoy this area. Don't have much more than that, frankly. I mean, I think you do live for the day. I think it's important. If you're in the healthcare industry and you see what people go through and what diseases you're trying to treat, you do have to appreciate what you have today. In terms of the company, it's really making sure that we continue to be focused on developing and helping to develop new medicines to treat people who can't be treated otherwise. My goal is to see a MaxCyte system, see the expert system in a hospital, actually treating patients, not just in clinical trials, but actually being there treating a patient. And that's a very fulfilling goal of ours. And that's what we all really want to do. The rest in terms of the trappings of that from a financial or success basis will come. But if we keep ourselves focused on identifying opportunities and working toward improving medicines, that's what we do. That's really what we're trying to accomplish.
I hear people say those words, but I see that you feel those words about improving the quality of life for people through what you're doing in your business. So
I got to share something with you. This is a bit emotional for me, but so I've never developed a drug before. This is my first time. And the thing that really amazed me was when we first started talking about treating oncology patients with our drug. And these oncology patients had gone through every therapy that their physicians thought could benefit them. And they were at the end of the line. And they knew, they were told they were going to get a sub-therapeutic dose of our product. They knew that this was not going to have an impact on their disease. And we were testing it for safety. So there was a risk associated with them taking this drug. But they had to convince themselves, and they had to convince their family members that doing that trial, not taking any drugs up until that point, and only being on our drug for what could be 45 days, without any hope, really, frankly, or maybe a little bit of hope, but a very little hope of being successful. That's real heroes, I think, in all the things that we do, are these patients who are working with us in these clinical trials, because we couldn't do this without them. I don't think that they get the recognition that they really do deserve, and their families, because it's just a really, really tough decision to make.
Well, as a cancer survivor of 2 cancers, both prostate and skin cancer, I want to have you continue to do what you do so you can continue to help me live longer. So thank you very much. It's emotional on both sides. So last thing before we close this with you, Doug, is a whole bunch of aspiring entrepreneurs are going through the trials and tribulations of trying to keep their biohealth and life science companies alive. So what are your words of wisdom to them? Because a lot of them have a long way to go to where you have achieved your success at this point. You're not even totally there yet. So what do you say to them?
I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I think it helps me at least. It's really find your passion, really find what it is in what you're doing that really does get you out of bed every morning and makes you work late at night. Stick with it. You hear it all the time. There's always going to be people who say that you can't do this. It's not going to work. But there's no straight line to anything. And some of the most intractable problems, if you just think about them, bring in the right people who all want to do the right thing, they get solved. Don't compromise. Don't compromise your values. Don't compromise the integrity of your research. You know more about what you're trying to accomplish than anyone else. Don't let the investor tell you how to run your company. If they could do it, they would be doing it. They're doing what they're doing. So take a hat off once in a while and feel good about what you do. And don't give in. Everyone says the whole Winston Churchill thing about never, ever, 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 right? You just got to do it. And you've got to stay on the high trail. You just have to every day, because it's so easy to fall off and get sucked in, and you can't do that. And the other thing is, you have to also, I believe, I'm always trying to help myself by doing this, and that's, you can never forget that other people are watching you, and even the micro gestures can make a big difference. And so you've really got to make sure that people appreciate what you do. And you've been an athlete. Many of us have been athletes. Think about being a coach. Don't think about being a manager or a leader. Think about being a coach, because it's a different world think about coaching someone, because that requires you to think about what they need to do to be successful and what you can do to help them be successful.
Well, you continue to coach and mentor people here, because we need a lot more Doug Doerflers in the region. So, Doug, again, thank you for being on BioTalk, and we'll continue to see you growing in the biohealth capital region.
Well, thank you. And any of you who want to try to do this with Rich, I got to tell you, it's better than therapy, and it's a lot cheaper. So
let's have a glass of wine.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.